So this week in the news, what have we got, Rhiannon?
Did you see WPP with their RTO mandate asking people to come in 4 days a week?
4 days a week.
In a month, 2 Fridays as well.
Okay.
In an apparently unrelated move after a petition signed by 20,000 of their colleagues, in an allegedly unrelated move, they then said, that's okay, we'll do free lunch Fridays.
No such thing as a free lunch.
There really isn't, even though this lunch contained beef ragu, garlic bread, and a spring salad. Delicious.
Okay, I might have come into the office for that.
But no, I mean, it really raised some interesting things for me and a little bit confronting, because I really believe in flexibility and we've set a whole business up on it. But what I also know to be true, especially in the creative industry and having worked in creative agencies our whole lives, I think we'll probably agree that you can do some of your best creative work when you're face to face, side by side, working on a project together. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, you would have the opportunity to have hybrid moments where you can connect intentionally and purposefully and sprint at something together in the same place. That said, I think what it does do is, if you don't have that flexibility, if they start to have this mandate, you are also excluding people from creative industries. And we know there is a huge problem with getting enough women in creative industries, people over a certain age, people with caring responsibilities, people with kids. It is quite a young person's game, partly because of that desire to have everyone in the office that we know creative agencies absolutely love.
I thought when I read the petition, 20,000 people, and they were citing work-life balance. They were talking about commuting, both the time and the cost, employee well-being, and actually employee preferences. And I kind of thought, regardless of what your view on it was, I suspect, I don't know to be clear, but I suspect they missed a trick in just involving the people in that process. I had a client ask me just this week, we're going to go up from 2 to 3. What should we do? And my number one thing was, let's make it a conversation and a consultation before you just mandate it.
Yeah.
Because it gives the impression of being out of touch.
Definitely. And I think there's a way of doing it where obviously it might not be a choice, right? But you could say, what would make this easier for you? We are obviously asking for something new from you. What could we help with in return? Like, are there commuting cost factors that we need to consider in this? Is it going to exclude some members from getting into the office and being able to do their job? How can we make this work for people, knowing that it is something we believe in firmly as an organisation and we need to try and do together? And we are going to need your help to do that.
And they did cite higher, allegedly. I mean, I don't know whether their evidence was transparent for everyone to read, but the CEO in his memo cited higher client survey satisfaction scores and higher employee engagement when people were in the office.
That's interesting. And that's helpful to play back to colleagues
right?
as well.
Having that strategic narrative that goes over these conversations that actually explains why. But you do need to be in a position, I think, where colleagues actually trust and believe you when you're saying those things too. It made me think though, like, we run a fully remote business, and we have to for the global talent that we've got and the global clients that we've got. But honestly, if I could, I would run a hybrid business. I would have my people coming into the office, and I would mandate some days to do that. So I do understand the conflict, and I think it's a classic situation of outcomes over optics. You know, that I would design a hybrid business, and I would make sure that it was focused on actual connection rather than control, you know, outcomes rather than optics, and actually try and get us to a position where people wanted to come in, not for your ragu and your spring salad, but for the feeling and the meaning of being in work.
I think that's what it's about. It's about showing them the meaning and the impact again. And I think people have lost that joy in collaboration and connection in person. It feels intimidating. It feels almost like a leap they have to take because they're so used to working on a screen. And I think it's about showing them how productive and how positive an experience that can be to make it worth their while to have to flex and have to adapt back again. So we've been talking a lot in our organization, of course, about intentional moments of getting together, because for us it involves flying people, getting them into a space, and having a considered reason and purpose to bring them together. And I think that organizations considering hybrid need to do the same thing. Show intentionality in why you're asking people to come in and how you're asking them to collaborate in person versus virtually. Show them the difference. Design workshops, design sprints that are specifically designed to be run in person and benefit from that in-person connection to rebuild that trust.
I think that's something Atlassian have always done so well, isn't it? Is those intentional culture moments where they're a fully digital business, but it's baked into their culture, is that we know that you will benefit when we're together. And we hear that from our team too, where there's nothing like the energy boost and the sort of collective mindset feeling that we get from our team once they've been together in person.
Yeah. I think one of the things I've also been thinking about is how much those intentional in-person connection moments actually help to really foster that trust in the team as well. And we obviously talk a lot about radical candor in our organization, but to be able to do that, especially in a virtual remote business, you need to have that base of trust and connection before that. And that can be really hard to build virtually. So then when you try on top of that to be really direct with people, they haven't built that in-person understanding of how the other person communicates and what their intentions are.
And they often don't get to pick up on the body language or the non-verbal cues that say, it's okay, you're safe in this conversation. We're having a direct, hard conversation, but you can still trust me. And I think trust is a really core part of the RTO stuff. And I do think that's part of the reason why some of the RTO mandates aren't landing like the leadership teams would want, is perhaps because there's a trust problem first. I'm massively interested in this rise of digital micromanagement. So with coming back to return to office, we're seeing a rise in surveillance tech, which is kind of weird. Like, again, as a business owner, I understand the need to understand productivity, to analyze, to be able to be clear on your utilization as a business. I get it. But it's a kind of weird Big Brother world now where we're seeing things like office heat map sensors. So you know where, like, which teams are in, what they're doing. We're seeing software like keyboard logging, so that you know when people are working, how hard they're working, how much they're typing. And that, to be honest, that's some of the stuff that I read about that felt most acceptable. That there is a real range of stuff that really starts to feel quite uncomfortable when it comes to work and trust. And it gets us back into this conversation of whether you can ever trust people if you're saying to them, but I do need to surveil you. Like, I need to see you to believe you. And my issue, aside from, do I come to work to be surveilled, is actually more about what culture practices have you got that you're in a position now where your leadership isn't strong enough, your communication isn't good enough, your rituals and the way that you do things aren't clearly articulated or believed in, such that now you actually just need to track people.
Yeah. Well, it's also, how do you value people's contribution?
Yeah.
So are you valuing the hours that they put in and their presenteeism, or are you valuing clear outcomes and delivery? I thought this was really interesting when in COVID, a lot of high productive expert tech talent were actually running side hustles. So they might be working for 3 companies at once because they didn't have to come in the office. And I think that obviously damaged a lot of trust. But at the same time, I was asking myself the question, well, if they're delivering on the objectives of the work you've got for them in 3 days instead of the 5 you've allocated, then actually your problem isn't that they aren't delivering. Your problem is that you're not setting them high enough goals.
Yeah.
If they have 2 days extra to go work with someone else on the side, that's a you problem. Yeah. That's not a them problem.
Yeah, for sure.
And fair enough. If they're sat there idle for 2 days thinking, well, I've met my KPIs in half the time, great. You have a highly productive person, but you clearly do not understand how highly productive they are.
Or how to engage them effectively.
No,
yeah,
exactly.
It's this real conflation with being present with being productive. And it's so linked to the RTO stuff. It's so linked to a lack of leadership control. And I think, again, like so many problems with employee engagement, if you were able to truly fix the leadership and management issue, then you could fix a lot of, like, there'd be a lot of ripples that would come out of this that I think would also be better. But yeah, for me, it's a worrying sign, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. This rise in technology and trying to use technology to improve the workplace, or certainly improve the results of the workplace.
The efficiency, yes.
But will it? And I think particularly for Gen Z, a generation that's been proven now to need autonomy, purpose, psychological safety, I just don't know whether they're going to buy it. I kind of feel like they're going to log off, like leave, and then talk pretty loudly about their experiences and about how trust was not core to that business, and they weren't here for it.
Everyone wants to feel trusted, right? Especially if you were the kind of employee that knows you do a damn good job, knows that you get your shit done. If you then feel like your employer doesn't trust you to deliver on that, it instantly gets your back up, and it instantly makes you think, well, I won't bother then.
You know, it makes me think so many things in the workplace. If you consider it from a different type of relationship, if you think how it feels when your husband or girlfriend doesn't trust you, or you feel like your friend is doubting you or asking extra questions to validate something that you're saying or doing, it's such a horrible, confronting, uncomfortable feeling that really makes you reconsider that relationship in that moment. And that
makes you defensive and closed off.
Correct. And less likely to go the extra mile for that person. And so I think so often, if you just take that concept of thinking about another relationship and put it in a work relationship, which is all it is a relationship with mutual agreements that you both party needs to live up to in order for it to be a productive, healthy relationship. If you do that and think about it from a trust perspective, like, really, is surveillance tech the way to go?
Well, and what's interesting is employees are often smarter in some cases than their employers, because you hire great people who are great at technology, right?
Yeah, and better than you are probably.
Exactly. So we already saw it with sort of people inventing mouse jigglers and sort of bots to log on for them.
Yeah.
People are not stupid. They've invented the technical equivalent of putting your jacket on the back of your coat when you or putting your jacket on the back of the chair when you go out to lunch.
Yeah.
The digital equivalent of that is using technology to seem present, which is partly why people want everyone back in the office. But just because you can see someone sat at their desk, it does not mean they're working, does not mean they're working for you, does not mean that they are actually achieving their objectives. It's just an optics thing. And I think it's partly designed to scare people as well.
Yeah, and fear is not the way to create an employee experience that people want to come back to and want to work hard for.
No, well, we know a lot about that in recent climate.
Yeah.
Speaking of technology, I think it's interesting that employers are only thinking about how AI and technology can drive greater efficiency, make things go faster, automate processes, but they're not actually thinking about the opportunity for AI and technology to build trust and create more human connection with their talent.
Tell me.
I was talking about this at a conference recently, and the speech was on how to build trust with your employees in an artificial age. And we have this dichotomy, right, of the idea that AI is about artificial intelligence. And so that can't be synonymous with authentic connection, which is what we crave as human beings and as colleagues and as employees.
People, yeah.
Absolutely. But actually, when you look at other sectors and how they're using this, if you look at something like, for example, online therapy, because people don't necessarily feel that trust with a human therapist, or they can't get access to one, people are turning to AI to be their therapist. It can learn about them, it can understand them, it can build a profile of you as a human being, and it's responsive. It can be there for you at 3:00 in the morning.
100%.
You don't have to book an appointment. Yeah. And those connections are being built on something as deep as your personal therapy needs. So if you're talking to a bot about things like that, imagine the application of that in the workplace. HR is not that available. It's not that accessible. You don't feel like you can ask it stupid questions. Your manager might not be that great about thinking about your growth and development.
I think managers are a key place it could work.
Exactly.
Because we've got, in so many business, what we see is subject matter experts, but not necessarily leaders or people experts or relationship experts or even communication experts. And AI will be able to be all of those things.
Imagine having a conversation with your manager where they are able to use AI in the process of that conversation to help have a difficult conversation with you, to empower managers to, understand the kinds of questions that you want them to be asking.
Or even
and the follow-ups.
to have a level of understanding, to analyze what I'm saying, that you, with your biases, with your experiences, might not be able to tap into what it is that I'm feeling or experiencing. But the AI would, probably.
Totally. There are, of course, issues, and of course, AI comes with its own inbuilt biases. But if you think about how you go to the doctors here, I don't know if you have this experience. Obviously, we're expats and we go to the doctors in the Netherlands. But since the beginning, they've been quite comfortable looking things up on the internet.
Oh, it really surprised me, actually. I had that just recently. I was like, are you just Googling this? Because I could just do that at home.
They are. Yeah. But they're obviously doing it with a medical database and the insight that they have. I'm hoping it's not just Google.
No,
you never know.
I feel confident it's not yet.
But imagine using an AI partner for HR where you have all of the policies and the benefits to hand as a manager. AI can read and interpret those so you can give your colleague a great answer to their question about how the business does feel about those things, about how the business can better support you, or thinking about learning and development plans. Managers using that to say, okay, we need the person to develop in these areas, but looking at their performance scores, maybe here and some of their feedback and the conversations you've had with them to date, here are the things they're probably struggling with. So just making those leaps with technology to help us be more in tune, more human and more connected. It feels obvious to me that should be an opportunity that I just don't think is being fully realized.
I completely agree. And what an inspiring way to think of technology in the workplace, what emergent technology in the workplace, compared to the surveillance tech conversation that we just had. This is the kind of tech that I'm 100% behind and 100% can see would absolutely contribute to better colleague outcomes and therefore better business outcomes. I
mean, I'm sure employees are already using it. I just don't think organizations are fully. So imagine an employee prepping for a conversation with manager about a pay rise. Of course, you're going to use some sort of technology to help you structure that conversation, build your business case. If you're smart at all, you're already using that on the side.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot there. There's a huge case for AI in the workplace. I think, as always, it's got to be put into a culture where the culture is ready for it and that the two things have a symbiotic relationship where it's going to improve outcomes on both sides. I do wonder, with this rise of digital micromanagement, I wonder the erosion of trust. But maybe things like you've just talked about, maybe that will help rebuild it.
But maybe I trust an AI tool that knows me, that gives me clear responses based on company policy, more than a conversation I have with my manager where I have to read and interpret grey areas. I have to respond in the moment versus being able to consider my response are harder.
Yeah, especially a manager where you might feel there was some sort of bias there.
Yeah,
that you
managers are imperfect.
Yeah, of course.
So if we were to sum up what we've covered, what do you think the sort of red threads are? What do you think the takeaways would be for our clients?
Trust, leaders, managers, communication, technology being planted in the right ways into the right types of cultures, and making sure that, as always, you're fixing the right problem first.
Yeah. And I think conversation and consultation as well, as you talked about with RTO. If you are making big changes that ask more of your people, involve them in those conversations, make it a collaboration, talk about a value exchange.
Yeah, just like you would in any other relationship.
Right? Instead of, right, husband, we are now going to do things my way or the highway. Never goes down well, right? It's got to be a two-way street. There has to be a value exchange, and that's how you build trust.
Agree.